Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we will talk about Transformers. So when we think of Transformers, I'm sure this iconic image instantly comes to all your minds. I can't blame you. It happens to me every single time till date. So though the world of AI is not quite packed with cool cars and epic robots, there's one lesson that we can borrow from these powerful characters, and that is the ability to transform. Just like how those amazing bots from the movies morph into sleek bikes, roaring trucks, cutting edge jets, or even fierce mechanical creatures. So similarly, AI transformers take data and transform it into something incredible. So let's ride along and dive into the world of transformations, where the complex data turns into powerful insights. Similarly, and just like our favorite Autobots go from zero to hero in a blink of an eye. So let's go ahead and understand transformers a bit more. So transformer models are like the powerful engines behind modern AI. They are deep learning models that help computer understand and generate language, essentially giving machines the ability to do sort of speak and listen. And think of them as building blocks of today's AI revolution. From ChatGPT to Gemini, Midjourney, and Delhi, all these advanced models rely on transformers to do their magic. Just like how you need a strong engine to power a fast car, similarly, AI models use transformers to power their ability to generate text, any sort of image, and much more as well. So whether it's creating stunning art or holding conversations, it's transformer architecture that makes it all possible behind the scenes. So before we dive into transformers, let's understand a bit the history behind it. So before the arrival of transformers, there was a fascinating evolution of models designed to handle language tasks in AI. So this models from RNNs to encoder decoder architecture with attention laid the groundwork for today's advancements. Each of these models basically tried to address the challenges of understanding and generating language, but they had limitations that transformers would later overcome. Let's take a quick journey through these historical models to see how far we have come now. So let's start with RNNs first. So RNNs are also called as recurrent neural networks. So this neural network, particularly the RNN, started being used for translation and summarization tasks, a task in to the mid 2010s. Although it was built in around it was created in 1980s. It got a lot of I'll say eyes towards it during the mid 2010s. So the RNNs process the sequence of data like sentences, one element at a time, making them a natural fit for language tasks. And the basic concept behind the RNNs was that the RNNs pass the information from previous words. In terms of NLP, if I say, then these words are understood in terms of tokens, right? So basically, it takes these tokens to influence the understanding of current words, and theoretically, this allowed them to consider context of the entire sentence very easily. But the challenges when it came to RNN was that it suffered from vanishing gradient problems, which made it difficult for them to learn I'll say, long range dependencies. If I give you in terms of example, then the relationship between the first and the last word in a long sentence sort of got lost. So they were not able to correlate it better. And the second problem was that the sequential processing made RNNs very slow, and at the same time it was very inefficient for long sequences. So when I try to cater or sort of put long sentences or data as input, it was not able to process it easily, and it took a lot of time as well. And as we talk about, as I told you, sequential sort of selection of information makes the task much more tedious and time consuming. So in long run, obviously you'll spend more, and more compute power, more resources will be utilized ultimately, which leads to a lot of problems. Similarly, after RNS, there was a time when long short term memory or LSTMs came into play. So LSTM networks were developed to address the limitations of the vanilla RNNs that I spoke right now. And the LSTMs introduced the memory cells that could maintain informations for long period, allowing the models to basically capture long range dependencies very easily. It was mostly used during for the tasks such as translations and summarizations. And LSTMs performed better than the basic RNNs for tasks like translation and summarizations because they could remember relevant parts of the sentences for longer period of time because of the memory cells that I told you right now. And the challenges that it faced was that the LSTMs, basically got improvements compared to RNNs, but they still process the sequences or the inputs sequentially, one thing at a time. Okay. For example, if I give you a sentence like, I am sitting on a rock. So instead of working on the entire sentence at a time, it was taking the tokens separately. For example, the I separately was sitting on a rock. So it takes every single word in the form of a token and then works on it or tries to understand exactly what it means. And if you take every single word at a time and work on it, it takes a lot of time. You will not understand when it's such a small sentence. But if I give you a very big passage, or let's say an entire book to sort of process and give me a summarization of that, understand the amount of power, compute, and resource time that is getting utilized. Obviously, it is a lot more, right? So that's why LSTM got, it was better than RNN, but yet it was still not able to solve the problem in the long run. After LSTM, the gated recurrent units or the GRUs came into play. The GRUs were another variant of RNNs, similar to LSTM, you can say, but with a simpler structure. So basically, GRUs used fewer parameters, making them more efficient while sort of retaining the benefits of memory gating mechanism, which was already there in LSTMs. Again, it was very popular. Again, popular for tasks such as translations and summarizations. Like the LSTMs, GRUs were able to translate and summarize tasks with good results. But again, it still suffered from some of the same limitations that again we saw in the LSTMs as well as RNNs. That was the sequential processing part. And then the second was the limited efficiency with very long sequences. So even if with the memory gated cells, it was still not able to remember the context or the words meanings and correlate them, in the longer term. For example, if I have a huge book, right, the sort of model will not be able to remember the first page of the book and then correlate it with the last ending page. So it was not able to sort of summarize properly in simpler words, if I tell you. So in the long run, it was not able to give accurate results. After the era of RNNs, then the LSTMs and GIUs completed, then came the encoder decoder model with attention mechanism. So it is still very recent. It's only been a decade. So in terms of AI as a whole, it's not a very huge period of time. I'll say so. Although nowadays every new advancements comes every now and then, but still compared to all those models that were brought before even I was born in 1980s. So compared to that, it is comparatively still a very new thing, right? Comparatively, until the transformers came into play. But why encoder decoder models also failed is also what we understand now. So the encoder decoder architecture became popular basically for the sequence to sequence task. Like again, similar tasks that I said right now. For example, translation or summarization sort of activities. So the encoder processes the basically the in the encoder and decoder part, the encoder part was mostly contained, or it was basically responsible for fetching an input sequences, and the decoder part was the part that used to generate the output sequence. So for example, in simple words, for example, if you give any input in form of data, you use encoder decoder models in order to transform them into something, some sort of an output that you're trying to expect. For example, if you give a data, for example, let's say 100 sentences, and then or a passage, for example, of 100 lines, and then ask the model to summarize it within 10 lines or so. Example. So that is what the transformation. So input was your entire paragraph, and the output was your translation that you got. Okay, so this is what the transformation happens. Now, obviously, again, encoder decoder had some backlogs, but before that, the attention mechanism is something that was very unique now. So, in attention mechanism, one of the most significant breakthroughs, I'll say, before the transformers. It was the introduction of attention mechanism, and attention allowed the models to basically focus on specific parts of the input sequence when generating the output, which made the translation and summarization more accurate. So it was able to understand the context at the same time, correlate the subject more in order to give you better intuitive answers. So example, if I give you then, let's say in machine translations, when translating a word in an output sentence, the attention mechanisms would allow the relevant part of the input sentence, example, the word or the phrase in the source language, that corresponds to the current word in the target language. It was able to focus on it and then correlate it better. So obviously the output's efficiency or the accuracy will be higher in simpler words. But again, there were certain challenges that even encoder decoder with attention was not able to overcome, and that were even with attention, these models were still sequential. So they suffered from inefficiencies in processing long sequences, and the computations required for the attention within RNN was difficult to parallelize as well. Parallelize. So basically, instead of working on one data, a single tokens at a time, parallelly working on multiple token was still not possible till now. And that's where the main hero of the entire story, that is Transformers, comes into play. But let's understand. Now, this gives you a small brief on the history behind Transformers. Why Transformers it came into play? Because first of all, the data are still getting worked on sequentially before Transformers, right? And the information or the context was not still being able to kept in contact. Basically, you still saw that there basically there was still some sort of a inefficiency or some sort of gap in between understanding concepts, the context of the informations, and then correlating it better in terms of summarizing it, giving you a translated information. If let's say that was getting sort of sorted out with the help of encoder decoder with attention mechanism, it still was working on sequential basis, which took a lot of compute power intensive work, at the same time a long period of uh, time in general in order to sort of process that data. And again, that's where transformers came into play. But before going into transformers and understanding the architecture, let me just give you a small brief on why transformers are important and where transformers are getting used nowadays. So transformers are getting used in different sectors. NLP is one of them, so natural language processing, where you work on sort of natural language data and then convert those inputs into some sort of output. So summarization sort of tasks, translations, all come into NLP, right? So with the help of transformers, you can work on text generations, translation kind of tasks, even summarizing any sort of text. At the same time, sentiment analysis also. So for example, let's say if you give the most important or the most, I'll say not important, but the most famous example is the Twitter sentiment analysis, right? Where we work on that raw data. I'm pretty sure you must have worked on it. Or let's say if you take an example that the Twitter, sort of on the Twitter, there are multiple tweets, right? And let's say if you work on a algorithm that can basically analyze whether what sort of tweets are getting pushed out, whether it's positive, negative, whether it's I'll say something which is like on a skeptical end, I'll say, or something sometimes satire. It is like some sort of satire or something. So you can categorize in multiple manner also, whether it is harmful, whether it is explicit or not. All these things can be sentiment analysis. Mostly we do it in a very basic manner to positive, negative, right? So that things can be done very easily with the help of transformers. Apart from that, if we talk about computer visions, then transformers are used to basically analyze images by dividing them into small patches, and understanding these relationships between them was easily capable of doing when transformers were involved. So this approach were called as vision transformers. Although we'll not talk much about it, I'm just giving you a little bit of context. This helps the AI models recognize the objects and understand images, similar to how they process the language, allowing them to perform tasks like image classifications and object detections in better manner. So you must have heard about YOLO kind of algorithms, right? Where it was one of the most basic deep learning methods to identify the objects. For example, let's say in this particular image, you see that how a algorithm or a model can view any live image and then detect different I'll say components. For example, on this particular image, you can see that there are pedestrians, then there is a traffic signal, then there are vehicles passing by, then there's cyclists and so on. So when sort of in computer vision we are able to identify or sort of track the movement of those different objects, and that is capable better. I mean, the outputs that were received by applying transformers were way higher than any other model which were used previously. So again, the same transformer architecture can be used in the computer vision sector as well. Just imagine, it's so amazing, right? And the next part is the recurrent learning sort of parts or protein folding as well. So in recurrent learning, basically, machine starts learning the human kind of tasks by just observing. So for example, let's say uh, a machine is able to imitate what or how you are speaking is what something you can say is reinforcement learning. Probably reinforcement learning will be like, let's say if you do a task of just, let's say you must have come across these robots, right, that can do the basic task. So how are they able to do this? They are able to do this nowadays using reinforcement learning as well. So for example, let's say you train the I'll say the algorithm to act or to sort of imitate what your steps that you're taking. I'm just giving you an example in terms of robots so that you can understand it easily. Although you can do it in terms of algorithms also, how you are able to process the data, how you are able to fidget out or not fidget, but figure out exactly what the different components are and so on and so forth can be done easily with the help of reinforcement learning. Similarly, speech recognition is something where again transformers are used widely now. And basically in telecalling kind of activities where let's say there are again tasks or you must have gone through uh, I'll say projects where you're working on audio data, or let's say if you're working on some client information which is pertain to audio related information, specifically to the telecommunicating communicating sectors. Sorry. So to the telecommunication sectors, like it can be call centers, can be any banking firm also who sort of picks up the calls of customers and then tries to explain them, right? And let's say if you take this audio and then understand the conversation between the sort of customer, client, and the speaker, right? You can do that very easily with the help of transformers. Or let's say another task can be finding out minutes of meetings, right? uh, Taking the audio and then converting it into a form of text. All these things can be done with the help of transformers very easily. Apart from that, protein folding is another very new thing. So basically, I'll just give you a very small brief on what exactly it does. So transformers basically helps to predict the 3D shapes of proteins from their amino acid sequences very easily. So this is important because of the protein shape that is getting determined by its function. And in the models like AlphaFold, basically transformers capture how different parts of protein interact among themselves, helping this basically will help the scientist in the longer run to predict how it will fold, which is very crucial for understanding the biology and designing of many drugs, new gen drugs that will come up or that are getting worked upon right now as and when we and you are talking right now through this video. So that's the kind of capabilities that transformers can provide. Now, as I gave you some sort of concept or not concept, but some sort of idea of how the transformers can be applied on various tasks, right? Coming from NLP to deep learning all the way to even sorry, not recurrent, sorry, reinforcement learnings. Uh, Now let's understand the architecture part more. So I'll take you very slowly and smoothly through the entire architecture. Although it appears very complicated, believe me, it's not. Uh, I was there in your shoes as well, so I do get it. So now let's talk about this particular diagram of transformers. This particular architecture was first introduced in the paper known as Attention is All You Need. So I would highly recommend you watch reading or having a read through this particular uh, I'll say paper. This is a amazing one. This is where this group of intelligent scientists came across this particular architecture and model, and then they had done a lot of work on top of it. So you can understand by reading through the entire paper exactly how they came across these models and what were the functionalities of it. Okay, and I'll again provide the link of to this paper as well in the description box below. And again, yes, I know that this particular architecture or the diagram looks complicated. Believe me again, but don't worry, we will understand the architecture with the help of an example. Let's dive now into the architecture of transformers, starting with a simple example. Okay, let's say I will just talk about transformers in the context of NLP task or the generative AI capabilities where you put informations or data or inputs in the form of text, right? I'll talk about that mostly in order to explain you the entire architecture. So over here, the simple example in the form of sentence is given. The sentence is the cat sits on the mat. Okay, we are just having 6 words over here, and I will tell you exactly how different components of this architecture helps to sort of find out or figure out more informations out of it, and how the entire process works is what we'll talk about. So imagine that each word in this sentence is a piece of puzzle, and our goal is to figure out how these pieces fit together to make sense of the entire sentence. That's what we'll try to figure out now. Now, on the right hand side of part of the diagram, on the right side of the diagram, you'll see that the diagram is again divided to 2 parts. The left part is the encoder part, and the right part is a decoder. So in the encoder part, the input is getting fetched, and on the output part, that input is getting transformed into something else, and the output is generated on the decoder part. So the left side is called encoder. The right side you can consider it to be decoder for easy understanding. Okay. So at first, all right, let's break down how transformers handle sentences step by step. So we'll start with the sentence first. That is the cat sits on the mat. The first step in the process is input representation, right? Here what exactly is happening is that the model doesn't understand the words like what we do, right? So we need to convert each of these words into something the model can work with very easily. This is where the concept of tokens and embeddings comes into play. So basically, at first the input is given in the form of sentence. Uh, then what happens is that on this particular sentence we do basically tokenization, where we convert these words into this sentence into word tokens. You can say each words are converted into some what I'll say, each entity of the sentence. Okay, every component within the sentence, like the is a one word, one component, right? They're getting tokenized. So basically dividing the sentence into small tokens. For example, the is one token, cat is one token, sits is one token on the mat. All of them are separate tokens. That is what gets done first. We first break them into tokens, and then the second part and the most important part is that they are getting converted into vector embeddings. So vector embeddings is nothing else, but they're like numerical representations of words that the model can understand very easily. In terms of example, I showed you like for example, the is getting converted in terms of a matrix. Okay, this matrix I'm just giving a just like a general example. This is how the computer or the algorithm understands it behind the scenes, like 0.5, 1.2, minus 0.3. All these are like certain numbers in the form of matrix. Similarly, it takes the numerical representation of the word cat or the token cat in form of matrix as well. So that is the first step in the input representation, where you provide the input and the input is getting converted into the vector embeddings. This is called as vector embedding, where basically the process of converting your words into numerical data or tokens into numerical data. Second, that is the after the first step, next step comes into the play with the help of positional encoding. So on the right hand side of the diagram, you can see that after the input embeddings, like the inputs are passed on, then the input embedding, that is the vector embedding gets done. Then comes the part of positional encoding. Basically, in positional encoding, since the transformers processes all the word in parallel, they need to know the order of the words. So the main distinctive factor of transformers compared to all the sort of algorithms that we saw beforehand, that is the LSTMs, the RNNs, the GRUs, and even the encoder decoder with attention. All of them used to do sequential tasks, right? Taking one token at a time and then working over it. That's the reason they were not able to correlate and remember the context for a longer period of time, right? Even when the memory cells and encoder decoder were sort of introduced. So Transformers basically is now trying to cover up, basically try to break that sort of I'll say silos, and now they are able to work on multiple tokens at a time, parallel, right? So instead of working on the separately, the cat sits on the mat. This all tokens separately, they are trying to work on this every token simultaneously. That's the power, and that's where positional encoding comes into play. So the positional encoding basically adds information about the position of each word in the sentence to the word embeddings very easily. So basically, on the left hand side, you can see on the again of the of this particular slide that the example. First of all, the token the is taken, and then we add a positional encoding, which is nothing else but the position data, so that the algorithm can remember exactly which data comes before and after what. so that they can correlate and understand the context more when they are sort of, let's say, you're asking the model to, let's say, predict the next word or something like that. Or similarly, let's say if you ask them to do summarization task or translation kind of task, they need to remember the positions very well. That's where position encoding comes into play. Okay. Next step after positional encoding will be the part of multi-head attention. But before understanding multi-head attention in the encoder part, that is the left-hand side, uh, let's understand first the self-attention mechanism before. So in the self-attention mechanism, the word in the sentences are compared to each other's through a self-attention mechanism. Okay. Basically, this step figures out how much attention each word should be given to every other word. So basically, like let's say comparing or sort of correlating first word with the other words. Let's say in the sentence, the cat sits on the mat. Let's say if the subject over here is cat, okay, you will take the word cat and then correlate it with the every other word in the sentence. Okay, now let's understand in terms of mathematically, not going too much in depth, but again, in simpler terms, if I tell you then they take this particular self-attention mechanism, and over here, what is happening is that they break this task with the help of a mechanism called as QKV, you can say, query, key, and values. So the query part will be the word that is more significant. For example, in this entire sentence, the cat sits on the mat. Okay. The word cat is the most significant because we're talking everything revolving. Basically, in the sentence, the every task is revolving around the cat. So let's say I take the query part as cat, and the key part will be all the components or all the tokens apart from cat, like the sits on the mat. All these different tokens are nothing else but this can be your key values and basically keys, not values, I'll say key. And now what happens is that behind the scenes they do some sort of dot product. So all this information are in the terms of matrix. Just imagine that, just the way I showed you before. And then there's a dot product that is getting done between it. If you don't understand dot product, don't stress out much. It's fine. It's just that if I tell you in simple words that they try to use this positional encoding part beforehand with the help of tokens and then try to figure out the importance of every single word compared to the subject. That is our query part. Okay, that is cat. For example, uh, in the sentence where we focus on the word cat, you can check the relationships between the different words in the input. That is, for example, the model, the token, the word, the, let's say if we take it as one token, then it is moderately related to cat. Okay, whereas sits is strongly related because it tells exactly the feature of cat, what exactly the cat is doing at that point of time. Similarly, the word on and mat are considerably still connected, or I'll say still in tune with the word cat, but not as strong as sit. Okay, I hope that this is clear till now. Now let's understand the multi-head attention part more. In multi-head attention, basically the self-attention process is done multiple times in parallel. Hence, multi-head, the name comes. And each attention head looks at the sentence from the previous, from previous sort of way, or I'll say different perspectives, basically capturing the relationships in a better manner. So, for example, one head may focus on the grammatical structure, while another may focus on the word meanings, etc. Okay. Now, I'll tell you why multi-head attention, because it allows the models to look again, explaining you again what I am trying to say now, is that looking at the sentence from different perspectives simultaneously. Try to rearrange the words, understand the meanings from different context. For example, let's say if we didn't have multi-head attention, then a lot of the biggest problem nowadays, or most of the models, I'll tell you in simpler words, is like the context or the meaning of the word. So similar sounding words may have different meanings. For example, uh, dust is deposited near the river's bank. Okay, so now a normal model might always try take this token bank and consider it to be a financial institute. Okay, whereas in this particular sentence that the dust is settled near the river bank, this bank is obviously not the financial firm, right, or the financial institute. So again, this kind of problems can be solved with the help of multi-head attention. So in multi-head attention, this particular sentence will be looked from different point of view. Understanding the sentences will be in a much minute manner. Okay, for example, let's say in our sentence, head one sort of might focus on the subject verb relationship between cat and sits, whereas the head two, that the another component or another parallel verb might focus on the spatial relationships between on and mat in our sentence, right? The cat sits on the mat. One head at one time, well, let's say one particular attention mechanism may work on the characteristics or the relationship between the cat and the sits word, whereas another part might focus on the word that is on and mat, right? Two different tasks are getting done at the same time. That is what multi-head attention is all about. So these different perspectives are then combined in order to get richer, sort of rich understanding of the overall model, right? Or overall sentence in simple words, or the input in simpler manner, if I tell you. After this entire task of, let's say, first input, then input embedding, comes, come, then after which position encoding takes place, and then multi-head attention gets done. After this, the another layer comes into play, which is called as your addition and normalization part. So basically, the addition and normalization steps in the transformer architecture plays a very important role in terms of ensuring that the model processes information effectively. Here's a very simple explanation that I'll just give you now. Let's say addition is nothing but it will be a residual connection. So basically, addition refers to a special shortcut connection that can basically uh, that will basically skip the certain layers in the transformer. This is known as residual connection, and it will help the model retain important information from earlier layers while new transformations are applied in the current layer as well. And without it, as the basically without this, the information that passes through the many layers might get disrupted, right? And that's where addition normalization comes into play. It takes the important details that might get lost or distorted, and it saves it, and the addition operation brings the original input back to the current output so that nothing vital is lost. So example can be like, think of it like keeping a backup of your original document as you make edits to it. So even no matter what sort of edits you make, whether it's right, wrong, whether you want to, whether it's absolutely incorrect as well. Let's say in that case, if you want to come to the original document, it will be very easy, right? It will be very soothing as well because you will not lose any prior information. That's the similar sort of task that addition does. In the normalization part, I'll say that after adding the residual connection, the output goes through a process called as layer normalization. So this step makes sure that the data is scaled properly so that it stays balanced and and stable at the same time, and it follows through the model very easily. It's important again because if the data becomes too large or too small, it can basically mess up the learning process in the longer run, making it basically harder for the model to learn as it moves on. And normalization basically ensures that the values stay within a good range, which keeps the model learning effectively, and it can prevent any extreme values from disrupting the process as well. So again, another example in this particular case will be like imagining that your imagine you're banking. Okay, you're like baking, not banking, sorry. Let's say you're baking and the recipe calls for ingredients in the right proportions. So basically, layer normalization is similar to that. It likes adjusting those proportions to ensure that the mixture stays balanced and it does not turn out into something like say salty, soury, or even bland or too bland, right? To keeping it at a minimal, or I'll say at a optimum level is what normalization does. So in summarization, I'll tell you that addition will help to preserve the important informations by connecting the original data back to the transformed data at every layer. And normalization on the other end will ensure that the data remains balanced and stable so that the model can learn effectively without being thrown off by extreme values. Okay. And if we talk about our particular task, then the original embeddings for cat is added to the basically to the process output, and the result is then normalized so that every information is captured very easily. Next, if we talk about the feed forward part, basically in the feed forward, after computing the attention scores, each word's representation is then passed through a feed forward neural network to sort of add more complexity and non-linearity to the context. If you talk about complexity, then it helps the model to handle the intricate and complicated patterns in the data, like understanding the full meaning of the sentence very easily. On the other end, non-linearity will be like allowing the model to capture more complex relationships in the data beyond simple or direct connections. In short, if I tell you, then the feed-forward neural network basically will add these qualities to ensure that the transformers can learn and process the complex structures present in natural language very easily and smoothly at the same time. Next part, that is the addition and normalization encoder part, is again done once again. And basically, as I told you, all the similar activities are performed once again. And when we talk about if you see the diagram, there's something called N and N2. So this means that there's multiple layers. Basically, this transformer repeats the above processes of self-attention, feed forward, and add normalization part multiple times. That is N times. And each layer helps the model learn more complex features about the sentences and in the long run train on the data much better. Okay. After this, let's come to the decoder part now. So the decoder mask multi-head attention is what goes on the right hand side. If you see on the right hand side, the another input is coming from the add and normalization part, and it is getting diverted to the multi-head attention part. If you see on the right hand side, before the multi-head attention part, there's something was marked on the decoder end. If you see on the above output embeddings, there's something called masked multi-head attention. So basically, the decoder takes the previously generated tokens and applies sort of masked self-attention. So basically, masking ensures that the model only looks at the previous words in the sequence, since it's generating a word at a time during the task like translations, right? So for example, in the case, if the decoder has already generated the cat sits, it will focus on this words to predict the next word better. Okay. So post this, the similar process of addition and normalization is carried out. And then we take the next step, that is cross attention decoder, that takes place. And in the cross attention part, the decoder also applies cross attention between the encoder output and the current decoded output. So basically, this step ensures that the decoder pays attention to the entire input sentences from the encoder while generating the output at the same time. And then similar steps of addition and normalizations are followed by the feed forward the steps that takes place after that. And then the addition and normalization of the outcome is done again n times before passing it to the linear layer. So lastly, in the linear layer, basically what happens is that the linear layer, the output of the addition and the normalization step is passed through a linear layer, that is fully connected layer. This layer basically applies weights and transformations to adjust the processed output, process values basically. Example, in our case, the normalized output for cat is transformed further, adjusting it based on the model's learned parameters. Sorry. And lastly, the informations are passed to the softmax layer. Lastly, we arrive the softmax layer where basically the same informations are passed to the logics. So let me come back again. So basically, when we talk about the decoder part in the layering on the linear layer, basically the decoder output, that is a series of vectors, is passed through a linear layer to convert the vectors into something called logic vectors. So logic vectors is nothing else, but it is like a raw score for each possible word in the vocabulary. The cat sits on a mat. Every word is a unique word in a vocabulary, right? So it will find out the scores, raw scores for each of them, and then train upon that. That particular information is passed on to the softmax layer. Now, what in the softmax layer is getting done is that this example, for example, if the model is predicting the next word after the cat sits on the, after this particular sent all these words, what will be the next word? So the softmax output basically will find out the probability of the next probable output, basically. So in this example, let's say mat, table, and ground. Mat might have 85% probability. Table will have 10% probability. Similarly, ground will have 5% probability, right? So out of all of them, mat will be the highest probability output. So that's where it will take the word mat and adjoin it to the entire sentence. So the cat sits on the mat. So it's able to figure out that the last word is mat. Similar, just imagine the similar task getting done in terms of translation or summarization. It will be very easy when you work on a huge amount of data. So that's it about the architecture part. Now let's say reasons of its popularity. So if I give you a very brief on the reasons for its popularity, is that parallelism and the efficiency. So the transformers process the entire sequences at once, right? Rather than working on each and every token at a time, just like RNNs and LSTMs used to do. Now we are able to do parallel work very easily. So it's able to save a lot of time. Similarly, handling long range dependency is another positive side. So in the long range dependency part, basically you will use self-attention to capture dependencies across a long sequence without losing the concept or the context. not the concept, the context. That was again getting lost in the RNNs, LSTMs, and GRUs. Again, attention mechanism is very important. If we saw that in the multi-head attention and the self-attention part, how the work was getting done. So attention is central to every layer, helping basically to focus on the important parts of the input and not forgetting the importance of those sort of tokens, and keep making sure that they are getting correlated with the right subject matter at any given point in time with the help of encoder decoder, where we put a input sort of data and then get an output out of it. So that is getting done by in attention mechanism that we can see in the encoder decoder attention mechanism as well, that I discussed previously. Scalability is something that transformers are able to work very easily, perform because it can perform better on more data and model sizes, scaling to billions of parameters, which was again not possible with the earlier models. Lastly, versatility and state-of-art performance is something again very important. Transformers will dominate the NLP part and expand into areas like computer visions and even reinforcement learning that we saw, even protein folds that we heard, right? Whereas all these RNAs, LSTMs cannot do that. Handling variable length input. So no matter how longer the data is, it will be able to make sure that the context is still relevant and it's able to understand the positions of every data with the help of transformers, not forgetting them at the same time, giving you a very calculated or highly predicted output, which will be very accurate, right? Compared to any of the previous models like LSTMs, GIUs, and like RNNs as well. That's it. So basically, lastly is the transfer learning and pre-training part. So transfer learning can be done very easily with the help of transformers, which is again not being able to perform by RNNs, LSTMs, and GRUs. So with this, I think that the session was good enough. I hope that you were able to understand the entire concept very easily. So I'll meet you guys in the next video. Till then, keep reimagining data with AI. I will also add a couple of more links that I'll find out about some interesting, blogs or some visualization sites that I have in mind. I'll put the link to that also in the description. Do check it out. And thank you all. Keep reimagining data with AI always. And do make sure that you like the particular video. Subscribe the channel and share it with your friends if you found it very informative and helpful. Thank you guys. Bye bye.